What's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt, and today, I hope it's not too late for another New Year video, because I'm here today to talk about my favorite movies that I watched last year, excluding all of the 2024 releases. I watch a ton of movies, 507 last year altogether. While a lot of those movies are new releases, a lot of those movies are classics. I'm always trying to learn more about cinema, expand my horizons. Now, of course, this is all just my opinion, and I won't pretend to have the world's best taste. I want to go through all of the films that I watched this year for the first time that I gave a 5 out of 5 stars on LETTERBOXD. So at number 14, a film that I really loved early on this year was Philip Kaufman's 1988 film, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This film stars Daniel Day-Lewis and Juliette Binoche, both giving incredible performances. It's set in Prague just before the Soviets invade. Something that I really liked that it was doing here was putting the intimate sexual lives of the three main characters into conversation with the political context of the era in which it's set. It's almost as though the imperialism of the era is entering into the sexual lives of these characters as they look to conquer one another, to bend them into who they are. I have heard that the book of The Unbearable Lightness of Being is far superior to the film version. I haven't read the book, so I'm untainted by that adaptation-itis. I think it's beautiful, one of Daniel Day-Lewis's best performances. My 13th favorite new watch of last year was Running on Empty. This came out in 1988, directed by Sidney Lumet. I was really struck by the similarities to Coda. This one is about a young man who wants to live life on his own terms, but his parents are both fugitives from the law. Throughout the film, he has to decide, does he stay with his family or does he chase his dreams? Does he chase the life that he wants to live? While I wasn't a huge fan of Coda a few years ago, this one felt like the same story, or at least a very similar story structure, done about as well as it possibly could. And at the center of it all is a miraculous performance from River Phoenix. He's so good in this role, just such movie star charisma. This has to be one of my new favorite scripts, breaking away from that mold that we've seen so many times of someone who goes out into the world to adventure towards a goal. Instead, this is about someone who's confronted with what's right in front of them and has to make a decision. Do they stay with their family, or do they live life for themselves? At my number 12 spot, Bull Durham. Bull Durham is one that I've known about for a very long time as a baseball fan, but I had just never gotten around to seeing this movie. It's directed by Ron Shelton, who really was on a roll for a while there with some of the best sports comedies of this late 80s to early 90s era. Both Bull Durham and White Men Can't Jump are fantastic. And the thing I love so much about Bull Durham is that it really understands that a great sports movie isn't about the sports. It's about everything else around it. The sports form a backdrop to the character, to the comedy, to the situations. At its core, this isn't a movie about baseball. It's a movie about learning to live without baseball. Or on a broader level, it could be a film about anyone who has made their entire life around something that has to learn how to let go. Beyond that, it's also just hilarious. It's got a great heart to it. This was just a home run in every sense of the word. And my 11th favorite first-time watch of the year is a unique film. I had never seen a John Waters film before, but in October, I watched Pink Flamingos for the very first time. I don't know what to make of this one, other than I've never seen anything like it before. There's so many movies out there that remind you of why you love movies, but Pink Flamingos makes you question whether movies were a mistake to begin with. And I say that in the best, most loving way possible. These people are doing the most depraved, disgusting acts. In fact, the film is most famous, and what I knew it for, was that the lead actress, Divine, eats dog poop, real dog poop. Every single scene is just upping the ante. How can it get grosser? How can it get nastier? While a lot of the time I wanted to look away from the screen or cover my eyes or gag, I really appreciated how go for broke it was. It structured these sequences of depravity as though they were action scenes in like a big movie. A scene where a man sits on the ground and prolapses his asshole might as well be Tom Cruise jumping out of a helicopter. This film constantly reinvents itself with how gross it can be. And while for many people, this is going to be one of the worst films you've ever seen, I found a lot of delight in the counterculture weirdos who were just making something bizarre, pushing the limits, the boundaries of what a movie could be. This really is a monumental landmark film in terms of weirdo cinema. Born on the 4th of July, the 1989 Oliver Stone film starring Tom Cruise. It's almost like the anti-Top Gun. Top Gun being released just a couple years before this. Also starring Tom Cruise, being a film that was so pro-military that the Air Force and the Navy set up recruitment desks outside of theaters that were showing the film. It's almost like Born on the 4th of July, even just by casting Tom Cruise, is luring people in with the promise of something similar. And then it switches over, and it gives you something much deeper, much more intelligent, much more reflective. While I'm not much of a fan of the current era of Oliver Stone, looking back at his works in the 80s and the 90s, from Platoon, JFK, he really was one of the most exciting, most out there auteurs of that era. Every single one of his films seemed to challenge the status quo, do something unique and different. Even films that I detest. I hate Natural Born Killers, but it's so unique. It's doing something different. It's challenging the medium. Oliver Stone was just on such a roll in this era, and Born on the 4th of July is one of his best films for sure. My 9th favorite film of last year was Sink or Swim, directed by Gilles Lelouch, about a men's synchronized swimming team. It sort of follows that full Monty formula of being a sports comedy about a group of mismatched, unfit guys trying to do something that they are not meant to be doing. And look, you could have given this movie to Peter or Bobby Farrelly. You could have given this movie to basically anyone working in Hollywood right now, and it would be a solidly enjoyable 6 out of 10, but in the hands of Gilles Lelouch, this becomes so much more. While every single ensemble member is taking their role with the utmost seriousness, Gilles Lelouch in the director's chair is also being incredibly visually inventive. There's constant playfulness and trickery happening here. The editing, the camera angles, the lighting design, everything that this movie is doing is so creative. It does not rest to just give you the script as is. It's committed to elevating the material to something greater. It's an incredibly earnest film. While so many American studio comedies feel really ironic, this one knows that it's not high art, and yet it gives its all. Every single moment, the themes of the movie, acceptance and self-love, and admitting that you're the least cool person in the room, but still loving yourself anyways, all of those themes are reflected in the filmmaking itself. In October, I crossed one of my biggest list of shame items off, and that is the Japanese film Woman in the Dunes from 1964. This is very high on the LETTERBOXD Top 250, and I've been meaning to see it for so long. Finally did. This is a remarkable horror film. It's a horrifying idea, being stuck somewhere that no one is looking for you, being forced to do a repetitive task with no choice. It's your life or the work. And while on its surface this is just a scary horror idea of captivity, it almost feels like it speaks a little bit to the human condition. I mean, aren't we all kind of stuck at the bottom of a pit shoveling sand day after day? Every single one of us in some way or another is a prisoner of routine, doing the same things every day. We push the boulder up the hill, it rolls back down, we shovel the sand, and the next day there's more sand. This is a state of being. This is what life is in a way. And I think that's what's made this film resonate so much with people over the years. It is beautifully directed, beautifully shot, the way that it captures the sand falling. There's very few images in cinema that are as gorgeous as the way that this captures the sand. This one has that masterpiece label on it for quite a good reason. My 7th favorite first-time watch of last year was Zhezhongka's film A Touch of Sin. It's an anthology of 4 separate random acts of violence set in contemporary China. These 4 stories don't interweave. They're each an independent act of violence, but through this we start to see that there's no such thing as a random act of violence. We're not just seeing someone slitting someone's throat and walking away. We're seeing everything that leads up to that. Violence is always a product of the environment in which it takes place. And in A Touch of Sin, the idea that's being put forward is that exploitation of the working class is the environment that leads to violence. None of these acts of violence are random because all of them are a product of the violence that takes place every day against working people in China. Whether it's by factory owners, whether it's by the government, all of the characters that we see commit acts of violence in some way have violence inflicted upon them by the conditions of China's economic system. I loved Zhezhongka's visual style on this film, that although each of these stories is different, all of them are linked together by a consistent visual style. He oversaturates the image in an interesting way that makes certain colors pop out, most notably orange, which is notable because of The Godfather. Anytime death happens in The Godfather, the color orange is present. Zhezhongka is stealing that motif. This film is a masterpiece, one of the best contemporary looks at violence, and I think it's especially relevant in comparison to what's happening currently with Luigi Mangione. In an environment where everyday capitalists enact a form of violence to feed their bottom line, why is it such a surprise when the people fight back? My 6th favorite first-time watch of this year was Fitzcarraldo, Werner Herzog's film. This has been a film that I've been meaning to watch for years. I've always heard stories about that Werner Herzog film where they pulled a boat through the jungle. Herzog's film tells the story of a man who obsessively has this idea that he wants to build an opera house in the middle of the Peruvian jungle. Something that really struck me about the film was how the context around the film mixes with the film itself. This is a story about an obsessive dreamer doing something impractical, immoral, and frankly stupid. Meanwhile, Werner Herzog himself, by taking on this project, is doing much of the same. This was a film where they had to literally flatten part of the jungle and carry a steamboat over a hill. And they did it all for real. Something that no filmmaker ever should have set out to do. This film is a product of madness, a product of obsession. So to mix the story, which is about the same thing that the filmmaker is going through while making this, turns this into a commentary on itself. Simultaneously, this idea also leads to a really interesting deconstruction of colonialism. Both the film itself and the dream of the main character to build an opera house in the Peruvian jungle are acts of colonialism. Europeans entering into South America, flattening the environment, shaping it in their own image. The film is a bit of a scathing indictment on Europeans who believe that the land all belongs to them, the colonial mindset that comes into play. I kept wondering to myself, what is the price of all of this? What is the cost of what is being shown in this movie? Both on a level of the character and the movie itself. It's both a film that engages in these destructive ideas and breaks them down and criticizes them. It's been on my mind all year long, something that I just can't seem to shake. At number 5, Suzhou River. This is directed by Liu Yi. This is an ethereal, strange love story about a man who gets out of prison encountering a woman who looks exactly like a woman that he knew years before, a woman who died mysteriously in the river. Something I really loved about this film is that the narrator of the story is completely outside of the story itself. We're hearing these events being relayed by someone who knew a person who knew a person. It's the type of framing device that I feel like we normally see in old Gothic literature, not in film. Occasionally, the narrator of the story will bump into the characters, will interweave into their story for just a second. I've never seen a narrator used quite like this in film. It felt dreamy and ethereal in a way that reminded me of Wong Kar-wai's films. But meanwhile, it was drawing on a lot of American noir. In a way, Suzhou River felt a lot like if you were to mix Vertigo with Chungking Express. While in Vertigo, it is later revealed that these two characters really are one. In Suzhou River, it never answers that question. It's like it's playing on the knowledge that the audience has likely seen Vertigo and is making you expect there to be a big reveal when the film's not interested in offering up anything like that. At number 4, I crossed a massive one off my list of shame this year, being The Last Temptation of Christ, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Paul Schrader, starring Willem Dafoe, telling the story of the last days in the life of Jesus Christ. There's a sequence in here that is clearly why the Catholic Church deemed this to be blasphemous. It's a sequence where instead of being crucified, Christ is given a full life. It's a remarkable sequence that really subverts all of these old ideas of Christianity. I really appreciated that Paul Schrader's script turns Jesus into like a Travis Bickle taxi driver-esque protagonist. He's got this dark inner monologue which shows him to be a deeply flawed and human character. So often depictions of the gospel according to Matthew in pop culture turn Jesus into, well, a god figure. Here, he's just a man. He's flawed, he's contradictory, he's oftentimes delusional, but that's what makes him human. That's what makes him worth listening to. All of the reasons why the Catholic Church and why so many other religious people have called this film sacrilegious, those are all of the reasons that I think this is probably the best religious film ever made. But of course, this is coming from someone who is not religious and a big Martin Scorsese fan, so take my word with a grain of salt, I guess. At number 3, Gregory Nava's film El Norte. It's a tale of the immigrant experience that treats its story like the classic idea of the great American novel. It is an epic of massive proportions in a way that reminds me of what The Brutalist did this year. There's only a couple of 80s films that deal with social issues that I feel like still hits the nail on the head. I think one of them is easily Do the Right Thing, but El Norte, I think, approaches the story of immigration, of being a refugee. It approaches it with such empathy and authenticity that I feel like this is still the definitive film on this topic. This film has no sentimentality, has no ideals of white saviorism in it. This is just an authentic story about a brother and sister traveling north to escape persecution and to perhaps have a chance at a better life. But ultimately, it's also a film about a system in America that does not allow for that better life to occur. While the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island may have once welcomed immigrants and refugees in, promising to look after the weary, this is a film about how American ideals have shifted, and about those who society should care for are often taken advantage of instead. At number 2, Andrei Tarkovsky's film Nostalgia. Nostalgia is an interesting one because I would be lying if I told you that I could recount the story of this movie to you. This is not a film that is about the story. It's not about the characters. It's about the themes. It's about the way the camera moves. Very loosely, the story is about a poet and his Italian interpreter as they travel across Italy. But on a deeper level, this is a film about faith. This is a film about culture. And on a purely visceral, aesthetic level, this is one of the most miraculous films that I have ever seen. I often find that the films of Andrei Tarkovsky will go far over my head, and yet, even though I won't pretend to understand every moment of it, something resonates deep in my bones. The way that he shoots, the way that he stages, the way that he sculpts with time. His films are an otherworldly experience. And finally, my favorite film that I watched for the first time last year is one that, again, I've had on my watch list for a very long time and have just never gotten around to before. And that is John Carpenter's film, They Live. An action movie about commercialism and about the propaganda that enters our daily lives through advertisements, through commercials that keep us in the system, keep us happy as is. In a way, this feels like a precursor to The Matrix, a film about waking up and seeing that you're part of a machine. But it's not just a film about all of that heavy stuff. It's not just a film about destroying capitalism and commercialism and about subliminal messages that are changing the way our brain chemistry works. It's also a dumb, fun action movie with lines like, "I came here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum." On a surface level, this is just an immensely fun action sci-fi, with a great action star performance from wrestler Rowdy Roddy Piper. It's almost like what John Carpenter's doing is engaging in that same propaganda machine that he's criticizing. Just like advertisements are designed to be as flashy as possible to portray a specific message behind them, to get you to purchase more things, or fall in line, or join the Navy. John Carpenter's film is giving you these subversive ideas that tackle all of these things in the form of a goofy action comedy. He's playing the same game that he's criticizing, and for that, I think this is one of the most intelligent science fiction films that I have ever seen. So there we go. That has been my favorite films that I've watched for the first time this year. Let me know what you think. Which of these films have you seen? Drop a comment down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. My name's Matt, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.